The contents of the lab report are meant for educational purposes only, and they're not meant to be misconstrued as medical diagnosis or treatment advice. Today, on the lab report, Tom Malterre.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the elimination diet, toxins, detox.
I love this guy. This is going to be so much fun.
Yeah. The world of medicine can be challenging. Clinicians and patients are always looking for more options, more effective treatments, and in the end, more answers. Functional and integrative medicine focuses on addressing root causes of disease. Here at Genova Diagnostics, we've watched this field evolve and grow for over 35 years. We've not only adapted, we've led. Join us as we talk about functional medicine, laboratory testing, and optimizing health. Welcome to the Lab Report. You know, we've got a lot of feedback about your love of candy corn.
I know. Haters going to hate.
It's polarizing.
Haters going to hate. Hello.
Hey, Michael Chapman.
Hi, Patty Devers. How are you?
I'm living my best life today.
Perfect. Good to hear.
How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good.
Hope everyone out there is doing well. And welcome to this podcast called The Lab Report, brought to you by Genova Diagnostics. It's where we talk about things like functional medicine, specialty lab testing, and integrative therapeutics.
Yeah.
And some other things thrown in the mix as well.
And if you're new to this podcast, welcome.
Well, hello there.
Right. And if you're returning, thank you.
Thank you. Hi again.
And we'd appreciate if you just go to iTunes or Spotify, maybe subscribe to this show, rate, review, leave us some feedback there.
Yep. And if it just so happens that you have more feedback and you want to share it, you just can't help yourself, but you got to share it with somebody. You can send an email to podcast@gdx.net. We'll take a look. We'll hear your feedback.
You think people are that compelled? They just gotta share it?
I mean, you've seen the emails.
That's true.
People are all about this show, and they're about sharing. It's a sharing community.
It is.
It really is.
Well, we're excited today because we have Tom Malterre on the show.
Yes, absolutely. As I said in the intro, I love this guy, Tom Malterre. He's got so much information to share with us, and he's done a lot. He's written books. He's a clinical nutritionist. He's done like TEDx talks. You name it, this guy's done it.
Yeah, you know how there's like elder statesmen in functional medicine? This is like the cool hipster guy in functional medicine.
He is. You're right. You're right.
So I'm excited to get some information from Tom Malterre. So why don't we call him?
Cool.
So Michael.
Yes.
Guess who's here?
Oh, I know. I can't tell you how excited I am.
Tom Malterre's here. And let me tell you a little bit about Tom if you're not familiar. Tom Malterre holds both a bachelor's and a master's degree in nutrition from Bastyr University. He has advanced training from the Institute for Functional Medicine and is a certified functional medicine practitioner with over a decade of clinical experience. Tom lectures regularly for IFM, is a past faculty member of the Autism Research Institute, and was a medical affairs member at Thorne Research. He lectures on nutrition and supplementation across the United States and Canada. Tom is the author of the book, The Elimination Diet, Discover the Foods That Are Making You Sick and Tired and Feel Better Fast, and co-author of the Whole Life Nutrition Cookbook and Nourishing Meals. Currently, he coaches doctors and healthcare providers in functional medicine, including extensive training with Genova's nutritional testing, through his progressive practitioner coaching program. And with that, Welcome to the Lab Report, Tom.
Thank you so much, Tom, for being here.
Oh my gosh, Patty, Michael, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
So first question, a lot of our audience are practitioners and functional medicine practitioners probably know your work through your IFM lectures and your books and just all the other amazing stuff that you've done along the way. Having an extensive background in nutrition kind of naturally lends itself to functional medicine, but how did you get into nutrition in this entire field? Like, what's your backstory there?
Well, I was a 10-year-old kid, Michael, and my family doctor was Dr. John McDougall. And so my mom, my dad, my brother, and I went in to see our family doctor, and he said, "Hey, guess what? I don't use meds, I use foods." And we all went, "What? How's that going to work?" And so we weren't very healthy at the time. And within a few months of being on his dietary, quote unquote, medicines, we were feeling fabulous. I mean, we lost a ton of weight. We got a bunch of energy. Mom had some pain, and Dad had some back pain. So there was a lot of stuff going on that remedied itself quite quickly with just dietary medicine. So I was like, what in the world? This is the coolest darn doctor I've ever seen. And so I kind of had this little complex as a 10-year-old kid of like, he's my idol, you know? So I looked up to him with all his potlucks, and I had a crush on his daughter. And it was just like, you know, he was the man, the myth, the legend. You know, his name was Dr. John McDougall, and he's like from Forks Over Knives, and he's kind of this vegan devotee guy. And he was brilliant. He was a really amazing man. So I was like, wow, you know, how many other things are we putting on medicine that really aren't as effective as we think they are, right? So if I were to go in and get medications from this man, would I have had the same outcomes? So I started studying nutrition as an early, you know, age. I was basically 10, 11, 12. I actually literally started reading research articles when I was a young kid. So by the time I was in high school, I was already averse with, you know, I knew what was to read and what was not to read. I mean, I had New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA and whatnot that I was reading, and Cell and Frontiers and Science and you know, all these different, Science Mag was delivered to my house. So there's like all these different things that I was just fascinated by. And I was like, well, wait a second. If indeed, you know, we can get better by making simple changes of what we put into our mouth, then what else is possible? So when I started studying nutrition, you know, I got my bachelor's and then I got my master's. But while I was on the Bastyr campus, of course, you know, we were told, go listen to this crazy biochemist. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Bland. And, you know, you guys will be enamored by what he has to say. And he was learning, he was teaching the same things I was learning since I was 10, which was basically, hey, don't take what you're told, you know, learn biochemistry, figure out a pathway, and determine how to support that pathway for optimal health, right? So you have this entire conventional medicine industry that's taught through something called the Merck manual, right? And it's basically a pharmaceutical sales manual. And then you have this idea of quote unquote functional medicine, which is basically look at the needs of life. Everybody needs air, food, water, beneficial soil, love, connection, you know, all these other things that seem logical, that seem incredibly powerful. And yet we're not being told from a biochemistry standpoint about how beneficial they truly are. And then backing that up with double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials, which is what Dr. Bland has been doing, the Institute for Functional Medicine has been doing. So basically all I'm saying is, you know, let's bring some credibility, let's bring some science, let's bring some clinical case studies and experience to that which we all know, which is diet and lifestyle changes are the most powerful medicine on the planet.
Well said. And you were in early on. I love that. well, on our podcast, we have discussed the elimination diet many times, but you wrote the book on it. You're the guy. So what do you think is the most important clinical pearl that is often overlooked when we discuss the elimination diet in general?
You know, 100% effort equals 100% results. So I was taught this by Baylor University gastroenterologist in 2004 when I was hanging out with him. And then it was reaffirmed when I was at the Autism Research Institute Scientific Roundtable, sitting next to Alessia Fasano. And Dr. Fasano, you know, incredible pediatric gastroenterologist from Mass General. It was like, you know, I said, Dr. Fasano, you know, it's really tough because some of my clients, you know, would argue with me and they would say things like, you know, well, I can have a little bit of gluten. It doesn't really bother me or whatever. And I said, but I was taught by this gastroenterologist many years ago. He said 100% effort equals 100% results. And I said, what do you think about that theory? And he looks at me and says, Tom, 99% effort equals 0 results.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, okay, this is the man, the myth, the legend. So, you know, all right, I get it. And so I think the hardest thing for people to get is that a little goes a long way, right? Our immune system is designed to interact with microscopic substances. And if we assume then a bite of a muffin is you know, less than a microscopic substance, we're wrong, right? So we are either in or we are out. We're either determining whether or not we have any sort of cross-contamination sources or we're not. We're either completely gluten-free, dairy-free, or we're not. You know, as Tom O'Brien, my friend, always says, he says, look, you're not a little bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or not pregnant, right? So you're not a little bit gluten-free. You're either gluten-free or you're not gluten-free, right? So I would have to say the biggest take home I would tell people is like, do it. Just go all in. And it is literally the most potent, I think, functional medicine intervention, lifestyle medicine intervention you can do. Is to remove the foods that might be irritating your immune system and then allow your body its ability to do what it knows best, which is to stay healthy. Right. So, go all in. 100% effort equals 100% results.
And then are you also kind of a stickler for the number of foods that you're eliminating on an elimination diet, or is there some wiggle room there?
So while you said in the intro, I have 10 years plus of clinical experience, it's actually going on 15 and a half years of clinical experience. And I would have to say the last 5.5 years are the ones that really kick me in the buns. And, you come out of the gate as a licensed healthcare practitioner, getting all these training from all these experts and whatever, and you go gung ho and you're like, everybody has to do this. And if you don't do this, you're not going to get better.
Right. Yeah.
And then, moms who have 3 kids, one of them is autistic, leave your office just glazed eyes and be like, how in the world am I going to do all this? Right.
Sure.
So I always meet people at their stage of change.
Yeah.
So if that person is ready to jump in, which very few people are, and take out 12 or 15 different foods and change their entire life and their, grocery schedule and everything else, great. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority of people I'll read and I'll do quite an extensive intake process and find out where their stage of change is. And it might be that person learns one new recipe that week, or that person might learn, where the gluten-free section is at their grocery store, right? And then we take that baby step upwards. But gosh, I had to come up with resources because getting people inspired and educated on how to do an elimination diet correctly was taking my entire appointments.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes at the end of the day, my kids wouldn't see me because I would take a group of my clients to the local grocery store and say, here are these gluten-free alternatives I was talking about. Here are the dairy-free alternatives I was talking about. And I wouldn't get home until really late, right? So you write a book.
Yeah.
I wrote the elimination diet book. And then I wrote Allie and I did an online elimination diet program, right? So people can learn the recipes and see what things look like. And, so you provide as many resources as you possibly can for people to succeed, but you always have to meet them. That's a great question. You always have to meet them where they're at.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking to that elimination phase, do you have a time frame by which you eliminate? Do you find that the longer you eliminate, the easier it is to reintroduce foods? Is there a tried and fast rule for this?
Well, in our community, it's pretty much been 28 days. And that's been kind of the time frame in which, the reactions go down. So you can pick up most things. But if you were to ask me off air or in a side alley and say, Tom, what's your personal opinion? I'd be like, well, certain things might need a little bit more time. There are certain things like corn and soy that are kind of nuantic. They don't really respond until someone's had them out and completely out for a while. I would prefer to have gluten and dairy out until the very end because those cause reactions in the vast majority of people, and that clouds the rest of your elimination diet experience.
Right.
So ideally, if we were to say there's an ideal world and it's not something you're trying to sell to a publisher, I would say 2 months is probably a better bet, if everybody were willing to follow it. And at the end of that 2 months, you start adding things back in, you'll know, at that time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, switching gears just a little bit, because another thing, you talk about toxins and environmental medicine quite a bit. And, many people aren't even aware of the true scope of environmental toxins and everything that we're being exposed to. So, I mean, how prevalent are these environmental toxins, and what are some of the more common exposures that we should be paying attention to? What's the thing that is the major exposure problem?
Yeah, sure. The reality is we are all bombarded with toxins, and there are, depending on who you talk to from what part of the globe, over 100,000 industrial chemicals in use right now that we are going to have in our air, water, food, soil, clothing. We'll be exposed to them in our personal care products. They're on us, they're in us, they're around us. We become them and they become us. Yeah. I was just talking to somebody today about a frightening research article about parabens, right? One of the preservatives used in personal care products, and how they're estimating that our children now have more estrogenic activity in their bodies from parabens than they do from their own excretion of estrogens. So the reality is we cannot escape them. It doesn't matter what kind of biological studies that are being done, if it's cord blood on unborn children or if it's adult studies. We all have these chemicals in us and on us. So we have to be conscious of the fact they will change our physiology. They're going to change our mental function. They're going to change our which would include mood and cognitive function, so ability to remember and form thoughts, as well as it's going to change our gut, as well as it's going to change, our energy levels tremendously. Out of all the chemicals being tested so far, not a single one has been shown not to affect mitochondrial function. So our energy is going to be impeded upon. So it doesn't matter what disease you're looking at. And I think the person who's done this really beautifully is Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, right? And he's kind of looked at these algorithms and determined what percentage of chemical exposure is responsible for type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease or energy disorders and whatnot. So track Joe's work on that. It's pretty fantastic. But if you were to say, hey, Tom, what are some of the big stones in the jar? What are some of the big things that you should avoid because, they play a massive role? But one of the best researched stuff is the plastics. So, BPA has been looked at extensively, and that's Fred von Saal and, Pete Myers and, Theo Colburn, God rest her soul, who they've taken the term and made it into a reality for us, endocrine disrupting chemical, right? Mm-hmm. And they've actually brought to our consciousness that these petroleum based byproducts are so similar to human hormones that our cells want to interact with them. Mm-hmm. They think that they're getting these love, reproduction, metabolism chemicals from the environment that would say, perform better, right? Mm-hmm. So the aromatic compounds from plants or whatnot. And we should then take them in and then they will better us, right? Well, no, these petroleum-based byproducts have been treated with chemicals and burnt, and their structure is now different. And so they bind to these hormone receptors and they do the exact opposite of what we want them to do. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the plastics themselves are huge. So if you were to look at BPA, right, that's a lot of the soft plastic stuff. That's the lining of the cans. So any plastic substance you can think of. If you can lower your exposure to that, that'd be great. Secondary class of that would be the phthalates. Then the phthalates are usually softening agents that you're seeing. And they're also the things that hold in the color and fragrances in personal care products. So anytime you see fragrance or parfum, just think the phthalates, So if we could lower the exposure of these plasticizing agents, mm-hmm. We would be changing our mood. We'd be changing mm-hmm. thyroid function. We'd be changing obesity. I mean, there's articles in very conventional medicine journals, JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, showing direct correlations between BPA concentration and cardiovascular disease. So it's well established, the research on that BPA. So I would say, watch out for plastics.
Well, when you're talking to patients, I mean, it's scary, and you're telling them to limit all of these things. Yeah. Are there specific physiologic effects of these toxins, like obesogens or endocrine disruptors, that resonate more with people to convince them?
What's kind of the argument?
What's the one that gets them?
Brother, sister wants to lose this extra weight around our midsection these days. So if you could talk to people, it's pretty funny. I have people come in with chronic migraines. I have people come in with these terrible, autoimmune disorders. And their priority list is, can I get rid of the extra 10, 15 pounds around my belly? So, yes, these are obesogens. These are chemical substances that have us experience something called weight loss resistance. And oftentimes when we release some of these chemicals from our body, they'll rise in circulation. Mm-hmm. And then as they rise in circulation, we'll increase the fat concentration in our body to sequester these toxins. So we go around in this roller coaster of like trying to get rid of the toxins and gaining the weight and then, losing the weight and gaining the weight. If we could definitely consider eating more cruciferous vegetables, for example, and ramp up something called glucuronidation, then there's a possibility we can break that cycle. We can excrete some of these things more readily. So, I would say, if you're concerned about weight loss, then be concerned about chemicals. Yeah.
From a food perspective, is there a certain thing that you recommend people avoid at all costs? Like, the large fish might be one thing that I consider or I have a personal vendetta against microwave popcorn. I don't know if there's something else out there that you might think about from.
Yeah, right. Sure. The large predatory fish, I guess the problem with that is the concentrations of mercury are pretty high, but then there's a lot of bioaccumulation of other chemicals in the ocean these days that are starting to accumulate in the fish as well, including microplastics, which is bizarre. But when you're washing clothes, so you have this beautiful sports outfit for your soccer game or whatever, and it's made of this soft plastic type material, and you wash it, all that lint that you see in the air actually ends up, smaller even particles will end up in the water supply and end up in the ocean. So we're getting a lot of different chemicals in the ocean. So the larger predatory fish will highly bioaccumulate those. So you'll have a massive amount of toxins in those big fish. So that would be a good one to if not avoid, then definitely limit your exposure. And it depends on who you're talking to, WHO recommendations or whatnot. We're down to like one serving of tuna per month, so it's, and I talk to people who are eating, 1 or 2 cans per week. And I'm like, whoa, you're going to get a little higher level of certain substances you're not interested in. So that would be a safe one. Sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking about toxic foods, talk a little bit about, is it worth getting organic versus non-organic foods, and what, how you use the Dirty Dozen as a tool?
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. The reality is that amount of chemicals that are in conventional versus organic foods is higher. There's no disputing that. Mm-hmm. And what has never been focused on is the type of chemicals that are allowed on conventional crops, which is that migrate into organic crops. The type of chemical, the potential hazards of the chemical from conventional crops is such that the difference that you would have physiologically is significant. And there are multiple studies, showing kids that are exposed to pesticides early on versus those who are not exposed to pesticides, how neurological development takes place and IQ scores, and it's pretty significant. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen those things from like the grocery stores online, like the Sweetest family who was eating conventional and they tested their urine and they found fertilizers and agricultural chemicals and all sorts of chemicals in their urine. Yeah. And then they changed out every single ingredient in their diet for 2 weeks and then tested their urine again. And all those chemicals almost disappeared in the youngest kids and reduced drastically in the adults. There's a massive exposure to chemicals through the diet. So, for example, BPA, let's just take that one. Uh-huh. You can reduce 66% of your BPA exposure by eating what would be considered a fresh food diet. And that would be a diet that doesn't touch plastic. So it's not a canned, food diet. It doesn't have any, coffee filters or makers that have plastic. So like the little balls of plastic that you put into your coffee maker and whatnot, you wouldn't be consuming any sort of beverage out of a plastic container. It'd be a stainless steel container. You wouldn't be buying any milk or juice out of plastic. It would be glass instead. Mm-hmm. Just by doing those simple things, you would actually, and not using any Tupperware or microwaving anything in plastic, you could reduce your exposure by 66%. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So your dietary choices are massive for reducing your chemical exposure. They're massive. Yeah. So eat a clean diet, you're going to have a cleaner body.
Yeah. That's really great advice. And there's another kind of, it segues well into strategies to promote the other end of exposure, which is detoxification and biotransformation of hormones. You mentioned a little bit glucuronidation, but what are some other strategies or things that some takeaways, you talked about the cruciferous vegetables, but what are some things to help detox?
No, I love it. So detoxification in my mind is going to have 3 phases. One's going to be your exposure. The other one's going to be the transformation of the toxin. So you get it ready for elimination. And then the third one is going to be eliminating it from the body entirely. So your exposure is huge. That's where we talked about clean up your diet, watch what type of clothes you're putting against your skin because you actually absorb chemicals from your clothes. Watch what kind of fragrances are getting exposed to your brain because the olfactory network sucks up chemicals to the brain and the brain mitochondria is very susceptible to those chemicals. So watch out for scented agents, for example. So the exposure is massive. Reduce the exposure, clean up your environment, look at your air, water, food. Those are important aspects. And then second to that would be the transformation piece. And that's where the broccoli came in, where there's a lot of discussion and Deanna Minnick and Ramlee Hodges did a beautiful article talking about nutritional influences on phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism. That's great. But, tracking phase 1 enzymes is really a tough thing to do. Tracking phase 2 is a lot easier. And it seems like the broccoli is the champion, right? Mm-hmm. So broccoli sprouts, watercress, arugula cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale, all the cruciferous vegetables are rock stars. There's nothing really that comes close to them for ramping up phase 2 detoxification and improving then, multiple different antioxidant detox pathways. So the cruciferous vegetables is fantastic. And then the elimination process is usually the fibers, right? So increasing your fluid and your fibers, you're able to pee and then defecate out any of the toxins that you're bringing into your system. And without having the bowels moving, without having that bulky stool that actually pulls the toxins out with it, it's really hard to detox. So the elimination part is massive. And whether that's a fiber product that you like to consume or if it's fibrous foods and you're getting a lot of green beans and root vegetables or whatnot, it doesn't seem to matter as much. You just need to make sure you're getting plenty of soluble fibers and insoluble fibers.
See, broccoli, that's a shout out to the TEDx talk that Tom gave.
Exactly.
So go to YouTube, check out TEDx.
It's such a great lecture. Yeah.
That was a great lecture. Well, I'll tell you, this is all a little bit depressing, I'll be honest, because frankly, we're all exposed to everything and it's hard not to get anxious and really crazy about all of it. How do you walk that line with your patients between being scared to death to live versus finding things that are really negatively impacting their life? It's kind of a tricky line, right? Yeah.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Yes. And the reality is, as I age, I slow down a little bit with the urgency to tell everybody everything, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to pace that as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And so you'll bring up one thing and just notice like, oh gosh, I'm looking at your dietary intake here and it says you're microwaving your food every day at work. And, what are you microwaving your food in? Oh, it's a plastic container. Is there any stovetop close by? Is there a possibility of changing, the container into something different that might be Pyrex or glass, type of thing? And so, you have to get creative, right? And reducing one step at a time. So I just try and once again, find the stage of change. Where are they at? Are they in contemplation? Are they ready for action? Where are they? And if they're ready to move, then I'll give them something. And if they're not, then I'll wait.
See, because it's overwhelming. It's frightening.
Yeah, it certainly can. And I've had patients too that are a little bit on the other side where they're kind of hyper focused on everything, and that can be challenging as well. And say, I think one of the things that I always say is, yes, we have these exposures. They're happening at such a great exposure rate, but the body's also really good at detoxifying if you provide it the right things, And I don't know if there's another way, but I have those patients on the other end too.
I love it. And that's the reality about all disease, right? I mean, that's really, everybody gets so fearful because they're learning about all these irritants, right? We have poor diet and we have stress and we have toxins, right? And we have all these things that are piling up against us, right? So infections, microbial issues, allergens, all the things that excite the immune system. And everybody's like, oh, you got to eliminate all molds, eliminate all toxins, eliminate all, allergens, whatever. And that can be really stressful for somebody. So to really tell them about all the bad things and neglect to tell them about all the things that calm this down. So let's say you did have an infection like COVID-19. Well, what if that person had proper nutrients and they had proper vitamin D and zinc and vitamin C and vitamin K, and their outcomes would be fantastic. Right. So maybe it's less of a concern. Or if you had toxins and yet you had plenty of precursors for glutathione, like N-acetylcysteine and glycine, for example, then is the toxin going to affect you the same way? No, it's not. Right. What if that person was sleeping really well? What if that person was exercising? What if that person had stress reduction and they had plenty of community and love and connection? Then they're this guru Zen bliss person walking around and it's like, I can tolerate breathing in a little diesel exhaust. It's not that big of a deal. I just ate my broccoli for breakfast, right? So there's this whole balance act, right? And we're oftentimes as functional medicine practitioners emphasizing what's wrong instead of what you can do to build resilience and build somebody up, right? So I love that, Michael. That's a great way of looking at it.
Positive. I feel better already.
I mean, and that's one of the things too. I feel like with naturopathic medicine, we're talking about wellness promotion rather than disease
Being
prevention.
afraid of disease,
and it's just a little bit of a paradigm shift. But
I like it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's health care, not disease.
That's
care.
right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Great.
Well, we're gonna let you go in here in a second, but we do have one last question. It's a little bit of a off-topic curveball question that we call the fireball. So, yeah, exactly. So we know that you and Allie have both are excellent cooks, have put together some cookbooks and things of that nature. So there's certainly some culinary expertise occurring at your household.
No, like his wife is like a personal chef. Like she's a phenomenal cook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my question is there like a one dish that's like over the top?
The
like
best.
This is, it's a special night. Like this is the dish that we're doing.
Oh, okay. Yes. So I'm just a curry fan. So I love, Thai curries, Indian curries. There's two different curries that get changed back and forth that are absolutely fantastic. And if you want to send it over the moon, then you run out to the garden if it's still the season, which it's not now because the frost has happened. But there's Thai chilies growing outside the front door, right?
Nice.
Oh, wow.
So you put some hot chilies on top of fresh curry on top of a brown jasmine rice or something. That's fantastic. Unless somebody's doing a low carb version of a diet, because we're always, trading off diets and ourselves and stuff, But the curries are absolutely my favorite, especially in the fall time and the cold weathers because they're very warming, right? With a little ginger and whatnot. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're sold. We'll be over next time.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate that.
Well, we can't thank you enough, Tom, for coming on the show. And we want to encourage everyone to go to your website, wholelifenutrition.net, and check out some of these books, The Elimination Diet, your cookbooks, Whole Life Nutrition, nutrition cookbook and nourishing meals. And we're just so grateful to have you on the show, Tom.
It's really great to
It's an
talk to you.
absolute honor. Yeah. And I look forward to chatting with you guys about your amazing lab test sometime, because I just spent 7 months training a group of doctors in Boise, Idaho at multiple clinics on using the Ion 40 panels. And then there was a couple GI effects panels as well. But holy smokes, the case studies would blow your mind.
Oh, let's do it.
We
should definitely do a
have
case study
an entirely
episode.
separate episode where we do that. That
All right,
sounds
you're
perfect.
booked. You're booked, Tom.
Let's go.
Well, thank
All right,
you so
guys.
much. Have a great rest of the day.
Yeah. Nice chatting with you. Take care.
Well, that was fun.
That was fun and frightening, actually.
The thing that I will really take home from this is phthalates.
Yeah.
Phthalates in the scented aromatic
No.
sprays
Stop right there.
that
Stop
might
right there.
or it may or may not be causing
Okay.
vasomotor non-allergic
Okay,
rhinitis.
listen.
Some coughing.
I have conceded my toxic burden load and exposures are overwhelming. And in the past several years, I have stopped using plastic water bottles. I use stainless steel. I don't
Excellent.
microwave in plastic.
That's great.
I no longer wear nail polish.
Fantastic.
But I'm wearing my perfume.
I mean,
Choose your toxin. Choose your poison.
that's right. Exactly. It's sort of like when patients come in and they're like, man, I really like these cheeseburgers. And it's like, well, do you like your rheumatoid arthritis? Which do you like more?
Well, you got to meet the patients where they are. And currently, I'm still in a perfume place.
And I'm in the same room as you.
So I'm just going to keep eating more broccoli.
And my nose is starting to run. Next time on the Lab Report, give it up for Joe Pizzorno.
Talk about a legend.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited.
You've been listening to the Lab Report. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to our podcast, rate us, and leave us a review. To learn more about Genova Diagnostics, visit our website at gdx.net. There you'll find information on specific testing, educational resources, and how to connect with our show. Call us at 1-800-522-4762 or email us at podcast@gdx.net.
A paraben?
Yeah.
It sounds like a pool toy.
How about a phthalate?
Oh, a phthalate's definitely a medieval hand-to-hand combat weapon.
Okay, how about bisphenol A?
Oh, well, that's naturally the first letter of the bisphenol alphabet.